Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. It's Wednesday, July the 3rd. We're filming this in the beautiful Memorial Arena in downtown Victoria. Thanks, to begin with, to the volunteer staff and Shaw staff who makes this all happen. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack Show. And Walter, we're going to start off today with CETA. CETA is the C-E-T-A. It's a huge trade deal that Mr. Harper wants to sign with the Europeans. The corporations want to sign it with the Europeans. It's more than a trade deal. Basically, it sets rules and regulations that make it more difficult or impossible for local and provincial governments to do the kinds of things that local and provincial governments often like to do. Like, for example, if one of our schools wants to have a cafeteria and they want it to be locally sourced food, I think under CETA that may not be possible. You have to open it up to everybody, and I guess the lowest bidder wins, and you can't do things. But that's only a part of it. I mean, it's a huge trade deal. It's going to impact us, I think, in 100 or 1,000 different ways. Nobody in Canada knows anything about it, virtually, because the media has essentially just been told, I guess, by their corporate owners not to let us know about this. But I heard something on the radio this morning. I was listening to the radio. I heard the big hang-up with CETA now, even though it's a wonderful thing, we should be signing it. The hang-up right now is that Europe will not agree to take Canadian beef. And, you know, if we can just jam that, why not? Why won't they take our beef? But what they didn't say was that the reason Europe will not take Canadian beef is that in their estimation for many years, our beef is carcinogenic because of the hormones and chemicals that you are allowed to add in Canada to make the cattle put on weight faster. But in Europe, it's not allowed for you to do that. So for that reason, they don't accept Canadian beef. And it just goes to show the depth of the mess that we're in. When, here's a fact, Europe will not take Canadian beef because they think it's unsafe. Our politicians allow this to happen. They allow these chemicals and hormones to be added to our food. Nobody, not the media, not the politicians, nobody ever tells us about this, so we don't know that perhaps the most environmentally progressive part of the world thinks that our beef is unsafe, but we're eating it every day. And it just goes on like this, and then they throw it into an argument about a trade deal.
Well, you know, even the Soviet Union won't take our beef, you know. So, you know, what's that all about? And it's so sad when the media won't honestly report on the issues. And also this trade agreement, I always find they use trade in a strange way. You know, it's the North American NAFTA, NAFTA, free trade agreement. The thing is that it's more about investment than trade, really. I mean, what was the deal before, Jack, before all these trade deals? I mean, countries had barriers to investment, and they charged tariffs and things to protect their own industries. I mean, what country, the most powerful country in the world, became that way through protectionism? That's the United States of America, very protectionist country. So,
and what's wrong with protecting your own industries?
Well, actually, there's a lot to be said for that, because you create economies, you create whole economies to scale to suit the communities and the regions that the goods and services are needed. It makes all the sense in the world to protect the industries, and you have businesses, you have jobs. It's a wonderful thing. So that's what was happening before. Now all of a sudden, since the 90s, we have to have all these trade agreements. Well, what basically happens is that erodes the sovereignty of provinces and of communities and of the federal government. It actually robs away our sovereignty and lessens our ability to control our own destiny. Why should we rush into any of these agreements? Why is it really necessary? other than somebody makes a lot of money off the deal, and then other people pay a lot. You and I pay a lot. A few people make some money.
And I guess that raises the question of how, in what supposes itself to be a democracy, can the Prime Minister be on the verge of signing a massive trade deal that the people of the country know absolutely nothing about. I don't know anything about it except for snippets that I've heard here and there. There should be, there should have been years ago, a year-long discussion about this proposed trade deal before the negotiations even started. But they've been going on for 6 or 7 years now. It's very close to being signed, and through that whole process, the Canadian people, the citizens of Canada, have been kept completely in the dark about the whole thing. And this is the way our country operates, essentially, on all important issues. The public is kept in the dark. That's the job of the media and the politicians. And another agenda is played out, which seems to always be a corporate agenda. They set the agenda, the politicians put it in place for them. It's a crazy situation. One thing about NAFTA, prior to NAFTA, we had something called the Auto Pact. Yeah. And the Auto Pact was very simple. It just said that for every car sold in Canada, one car had to be built in Canada. And that way we had a thriving industry. Now I'm not, you know, it's polluting and everything else, but if cars were being sold in Canada, they were being built. Now, we have to give the corporations, because of NAFTA and the other trade deals, we have to give the corporations hundreds of millions of dollars over and over again and beg with them and plead with them to please invest in Canada. That's what the trade deals do.
Yeah.
What's next on our agenda?
Well, I think we're always concerned about how governments behave and sovereignty and looking at what's really going on. And the recent attempted bombings at the legislature yesterday, it's a news story. It's unfolding as we talk, so it's hard to get all the facts on it. But there seems to be some strangeness in the story already, especially with the associations that the police and CSIS had with the individuals, the alleged perpetrators of the attempted bombing, and it always harkens up the same concerns with me, in that you really wonder when the secret agents are in there and are now working with the people who want to do the bombing. You have to wonder, are they monitoring the situation, or are they actually facilitating the situation?
And you're absolutely right. When we look at these issues, these incidents, we've got to look at them from A to Z.
Yeah.
And it's known, I mean, there's no question about it, that in the United States, time and again, over the last 10 years or longer, these supposed attacks have been almost taken place and then stopped. But the story that's almost never told publicly, but always seems to be the case, is that these people had problems. They were almost manipulated by the FBI and local police operations into doing things that they never would have or could have done without the assistance. And then the big story appears and the arrests are made. People go to jail for the rest of their lives. And they ramp up the fear in the people of America about, you know, getting killed in a bombing attack, which meanwhile the United States carries out on a daily basis around the world, throughout the Middle East now for sure. I mean,
well, you know, it really does get down to some more fundamental questions, and I think I've talked about this before. It's like, I don't know what's gone on. I mean, I'm trying to piece it together, and so are you.
No idea.
And we're just trying to figure it out. But what happens when you start asking questions? You start questioning your government. You start questioning your police and your Secret Service. You start wondering about what is going on with them. And of course, there's always an element of fear. Because if they're not straight up, and if they have agendas that we're unaware of, it creates uncertainty, and it creates a certain atmosphere where the public doesn't feel secure to ask the questions that they need to ask to keep these guys in line. And it's always a bit of a slippery slope, in my view, when you have all these different events occurring around bombings and thwarted bomb plots, and you see these police involved in associating with these people. You really have to wonder, well, what's actually going on, and are they using these sort of incidences to control public behavior, to actually control how we think and feel about our society? Are they trying to create uncertainty and fear? And in that climate, how does democracy do?
Well, I think that over the past 20 years, there's been a government corporate agenda of more spying on us. Clearly, that's the case. You know, who was behind 9/11? Personally, you know, there's never been, because that seems to be where this stems from. The questions about 9/11 that have never been answered and need to be discussed and never are discussed are so immense that, you know, it's just not allowed. Now, of course, as I said, we've got to look at these things from A to Z. It could be, in many of these cases, that there are just people out there who are, you know, out to kill and injure a lot of people, and that's the way it is. So we need our police and security services to be watching over them. What we don't need is for the police and security services to be creating these incidents in order to manipulate us into doing what some agenda wants us to do.
I'll give you an example, because, I mean, years and years ago, when the Air India bombing occurred, and I think that was in 1985 or something like that, and followed it in the media. CSIS was just new, just the first time I ever heard of CSIS, and they had these CSIS agents following these guys that were building bombs. They were trying to figure out how to build a bomb, and the CSIS agents followed them right to the woodlot where they listened and heard the explosions, and knew that they were capable now of making explosives, making bombs. They knew that they were preparing to put an explosive on a plane, and their superiors were told them to stand down, not to follow these guys around anymore. It was a very, very strange order, right at the point where they could have avoided this terrible, terrible incident. Around 375 people died, I believe. It was a terrible, terrible crime. And it could have been avoided had they acted. And from that day, I never trusted CSIS. I was thinking, what would be the agenda to tell them to stand down at that point, right when they could have avoided a serious, terrible, terrible crime? So what happens is that you have these agencies that have agendas that are beyond our ability to understand, apparently, with national security issues and all those other things. But nevertheless, they're acting in the shadows, outside of the public view. And whenever you have agencies that do that, the United States has tons of them, you end up with, you know, a lot of abuses. And I just don't think we need this type of a service. I think we could have more of a straight up public service through policing. They can catch these same crooks. You don't have to have you know, this clandestine sort of operations that go on, in my view.
Let's just talk for a bit about Edward Snowden. It's interesting how the story seems to have become about him and the Americans feeling so righteous in going out and catching him somewhere. They're using immense amounts of pressure, I'm sure, with every country they can influence to make sure that they get their hands on him. And yet, to me, he's the hero. I mean, he has stepped up and said that the United States government, ladies and gentlemen, is spying on you, all of you, every day of your lives. And really all of us, they seem to do it worldwide.
Yeah.
There's something so wrong in the United States these days. You know, the American people have always been, you know, they've always been able to do a lot of great stuff, and there's a lot of great people from the United States, but their society, really for generations, they've followed this agenda where not if you can make money, just take it all. And for the people at the bottom, too bad. You know, we're just gonna let you fall, and they've allowed huge amounts of poverty in their nation. Then they created the whole drug thing where you focus billions of dollars to drug gangs. I mean, is that really what you want to do? By making drugs illegal? And you know, you create a sales force that wants people to buy more and more drugs.
Yeah.
All of these things. So big problems in the United States.
Well, you know, with Snowden, I think, you know, because, you know, one of the things he pointed out was that, you know, all phone calls and all emails, you know, have a time and a date on them. And the National Security Agency in the United States actually keeps a record of the time of every phone call and of every email that's sent. They monitor everyone's email and phones. Now the thing is that what does that mean for most of us? Not much. It must be, you know, what the hell is it? But the thing is, in the end, is like 20 years from now, somebody lays a charge against you, saying, "Oh, Jack Etkin, he's a sympathizer for some terrorist organization." So they can go back through all your phone calls, all your emails, and say you were just getting emails. Like, we get emails every day from all sorts of groups and people. I don't know what half of it is. I didn't even open them up. But what happens is that they could develop some kind of a chain of connection that you had to some organizations that you had no idea had any agenda.
And if you don't have them, they can just insert them into the mix.
They could build the case against you that'd be pretty well hard to defend yourself.
Let's move even a little bit more closer to home with what's going on with BC Hydro. I mean, you know, BC Hydro is just kind of the example of how we are being sold out by everybody. BC Hydro, which I think used to be a fairly great crown corporation, which gave us very cheap electricity. I mean, dams, reservoirs are not environmentally friendly, but maybe better than some other things. And now it's turned into our enemy. Like, they're out there, they're going to put a smart meter on your house no matter what. They're charging, the rates keep going up. The government is taking money out of BC Hydro for its budget that BC Hydro doesn't have and is having to borrow. I heard this on the radio today.
Yeah.
It's just, and we, the public, are kept completely in the dark, betrayed by all the politicians, it seems, since they're the ones who do it. And once again, there's this other agenda being played out, and our politicians, instead of working for us, seem to pick up this other agenda, and they work to either manipulate us into accepting it or just give it to us whether we want it or not.
Well, you know, how far down the rabbit hole you want to go with BC Hydro, but you know, the management of BC Hydro has an agenda. It really looks like privatization, but I think they have to drive the corporation right into the hole so far they could never save it, and then they will sell it off to their friends. I mean, that appears to be the agenda. It might take a few more years to do that, but and their tricky bookkeeping, as we all know, the Hydro's tricky bookkeeping is completely bizarre.
Well, people don't know because it never really gets a mention.
Well, it's totally bizarre. And in the BC government, the provincial government, instead of criticizing Hydro for their whacked out bookkeeping, has adopted the same methods and are hiding a whole bunch of debt themselves the same way. So I mean, we have a situation where we have the fox watching the hen house, and of course BC Hydro, you know, if you really look at their books, they're terribly, terribly in debt. So the only way out is to charge us a whole lot more money for our electricity, which would you think, well, you know, electricity maybe is under charged and maybe we should be paying more for our power, but why should we be giving our money to Westinghouse and General Electric? I wouldn't mind if we were actually paying more taxes or something and we got more services. But the way it's set up right now, of course, it's going out of the province.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems to be the case. And until we can regain control of our society, and I don't see it happening, where do you turn? Where do you turn if you want to? Is there a party you can vote for? Is there?
It's almost,
there's no answer.
It's almost guaranteed. Like you think, okay, we got an opposition party. It's called the NDP. Unfortunately, they were planning on doing all the same things the Liberals are doing. So they were supposed to be in the government, but they're not there. So now they have to learn new lines.
And the Liberals have to learn a new line too, because all the promises, I mean, there's nothing there, folks. There is nothing there.
Yeah.
Harper firing all the government scientists. Somebody mentioned that once all the government scientists are gone, which seems to be Harper's agenda, then only corporate science is left. So whatever they want, they'll be getting.
Well, you know, and the agenda of corporate science is to hide the facts, to hide the truth. So it's not very good for us, is it?
We're out of time. Thank you very much, Walter. That's been the
pleasure,
Walter and Jack Show for Wednesday, July 3rd. Thanks for watching.